Let's talk about making changes with Photoshop. Over the next 3 weeks, we'll talk about the core tools we use in Photoshop to create and improve our images, along with the techniques we'll use to enable this functionality. Photoshop is pixel-based. So we are going to be creating and editing raster images. So we'll start off by reframing the image by cropping. At its most basic level, the crop tool lets us cut off pixels we don't want to see anymore. You could resize the crop by dragging from the edge or the corners. If you reposition your mouse just outside of the corner of the crop area, you can click and drag to rotate the image. By making changes on the options bar, we can limit our crop to different proportions or exact pixel measurements. With ratio, we can select or edit proportions we want to fit our image in. So for instance, if we want a square image, I can choose that from the preset list. When I resize it, it keeps it as a square. Also, you can set exact pixel measurements. So for instance, if we wanted a 4x5 at 300 pixels per inch, there's a preset for that. And then if we decide, oh, actually, we don't want a portrait, we want a landscape, we can click on the little arrows here and it will flip. And if you leave out the resolution, so right now it's going to resize it and probably going to scale the image to get it to match 300 pixels per inch at this size. If we don't want that, if we want the exact pixels that we had before, we can just leave that out. So we'll just put the 5x4 as the inches and then leave out the pixels per inch. And then clicking on the clear button clears the crop for us. And then we can resize it however we want. So it's no longer limited to a ratio or a width or a height. And we can be as creative as we want. Now moving on to the right, we have a straighten button. So if I click that and just drag a line out on something that should be straight, for instance, the horizon, Photoshop will try to reframe and rotate the image so that it will have your image straight. To remove the straightening, just double click on the straighten button. To the right, there is an option for different overlays. So right now it's on the rule of thirds, but we can do a golden spiral, and then we can reframe our crop to try to get the subject in that area. Like that. And then we probably do want to straighten that. So let's get back that straightening. Now a normal crop will delete the cropped pixels, but you don't have to do that. If you uncheck this, Photoshop will crop the image and it will resize the canvas. However, it will make a layer for us that will have the remaining pixels just off to the edge. So if we need to switch to the move tool, we can move around that layer and different parts of it will show on the canvas. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'll commit to this crop. And right now it's delete cropped pixels. So there's nothing else on the sides. So all those pixels are gone. But let's take it back a step and let's do our crop again. But this time, let's uncheck that delete cropped pixels. And now when we go to the move tool, the whole image is still there. It's just the canvas has been resized. The last thing we'll look at is generative expand. So we're going to crop here and we'll straighten the image out. And then you'll notice it's actually cropping out these parts of the image because that would give us white areas. So what we can do if we want to have a bigger image, we can expand our crop and then make sure the fill is set to either generative or content aware fill. And with those selected, Let's see what happens. So first it performs the crop and straightens, and then it's generating a few options for us. And as you see, now those white areas that were removed by the crop when we rotated the image, and now are filled in with pixels that it has generated for us. And it's given us 3 variations here. So we can choose, I think actually the first one or the second, I think the second one maybe is the one we'll use. And then what we can do if we want this just to be on one background, I'm just going to press Shift, Command E, and then we will have just one layer with all of our pixels. The perspective crop lets you crop and straighten out an image that may have been distorted by how the photo was taken. Let's open perspectivecrop.jpg in Photoshop and try to reorient this image a little bit. We'll switch to the perspective crop tool, and then we'll just draw out a rough area that we would like to focus on. Now what we want to do is find parallel lines in this image. So for instance, we have these frames for these various paintings. So those are all approximately square. So we'll use those to reference. So I'll just drag this corner down so it matches the corner of the frame. And I am assuming that these were all straight on the wall, hopefully. We'll do the same with the other corners. Trying to establish a perspective grid for Photoshop here. Now I noticed that this cat is actually a little bit off of where it should be. So I'm going to base this perspective on the monkey. So we'll just have it like that, but I will use the bottom of that frame. All right, so now we have our perspective set up. We're not limited to just crop in this area. If we want to make this larger, instead of going from the corners to enlarge this crop area, we need to go from the edges. And we can go all the way out to the edge of that particular wall. And then we'll drag from the top to there. And we'll do the same with the bottom. Just dragging from the edges rather than from the corners. It looks like I'm gonna get a little bit of that. Okay. And let's see what that looks like. So, what did Photoshop do? Well, essentially, it distorted the image to make it appear that it was taken front on. And you notice some shenanigans are going on here. Actually, there's kind of a 3D effect that's not identically applied to all these images. That's okay. This is just basically, we've gotten the images of the animals straight on now, whereas they were tilted before. So I'll undo. And so we went from this to this. The pencil tool is hiding under the brush tool. It's just like the brush, but it's not anti-aliased. It's just whatever color and opacity you choose, and the edges of the brush are 100% that. There is no transition zone. So I'll change the brush tool to the pencil tool, and then we'll come to our presets here, and I'll choose hard round, and I'll use the bracket keys to change the size of the pencil. And then if we zoom in, we'll see that the very edge of this, there are no gray pixels. Normally there would be some anti-aliasing going on. So if I change this to the brush, let's compare that. So similar size. Oh, and I will change the brush to hard round as well. So if we zoom on that, you can see there's some anti-aliasing going on there with the brush, but no anti-aliasing with the pencil. The paint bucket tool is hiding underneath the gradient tool. We'll look at both together. Open the happycan.psd file, and let's play with both of these tools. The happycan is a smart object. We'll create a new layer on top of it, and we're going to use the paint bucket tool. So it's hiding under the gradient tool, and we'll choose paint bucket. And then I'll click on my foreground color and we will change to a color. Let's do green. And then I'm going to look at my settings here. So it's set to lay down the foreground color. Mode is normal, opacity 100%, tolerance is 32. Basically it's going to fill in based on the areas that we have here. And then it's going to stop where it says, oh, this color isn't continuing. Anti-aliasing is like what we saw with the pencil tool versus the brush tool. We definitely want anti-aliasing turned on, so we'll have nice edges with no kind of weird white spots. And contiguous is, yes, we want this to fill the entire shape and not go outside of that. And the other thing is we want to take a look at all layers when it determines the shapes that we're going to be filling in. So yes, we want that selected as well. So let's make our first fill. And then we'll do one here, and we'll change the color to a lighter color, maybe closer to yellow. Alrighty, and then and then for the sparkles, let's change that. We'll do those. Go more magenta for the other sparkles there. Whoops, not there. There we go. And then let's do, I don't know, some blue, light blue. For the little bubbles. And then, let's see. Let's sample that, and then we'll make that a little darker. And then we'll fill in these areas here. And then let's get the aluminum of the can going. So we'll change to, no, not black. There we go. So we'll get some kind of gray going there. And we'll just try to fill in these areas. And the shadow as well. All right. And now we have a happy little can. Now let's apply a gradient. So I'll select the background, and then I will change to the gradient tool. And then we'll just draw out a gradient. And we can change it from the presets here. So maybe in the pinks, let's see if there's something that will work. Okay, I like that. And notice what happened here. These are actually transparent, so the gradient fill is showing through these little specular highlights on the eye. So that's not what we want. So we need to switch back to the layer 1, and we will, I'll change my default colors, and then I'll flip them so we have white, and then we'll just click into those little areas there to fill that with some white color, so we don't have the background poking through. All right, great. And let's see, I think I want to change the rim, so that kind of gives it more of a 3D appearance. The clone stamp lets you paint with pixels from another area. All right, so with the clone stamp tool, it will sample pixels from one area and put them in another. Now, we don't want to sample the background that we've created, this gradient fill. We also don't want to sample the white of the background. So I'm going to turn off the background and the gradient fill. And so we have this checkerboard pattern implying that these are all transparent pixels. That's exactly what we want. The other setting to make sure of is we want this set to current and below. Because we're going to create a new layer on top of our little fill layer that we created, where we can put these little splotches. So now that we have everything all set up, I will alt-click on one of these little stars there, and then let's draw it over here on this side. So it's taking pixels from one area and drawing them on the other. Now, if I wanted to draw that star in another place on this side, you'll notice when I start drawing, it's not doing anything because it's moving aligned to my initial selection. So if we don't want that, if we want it to always start from where we first alt-clicked, every time we raise and lower our mouse button, we can just click on this aligned button. And now, when we alt-click, we can draw out one shape, and then without having to alt-click again, it'll just start from that same area each time, no matter where we are on the canvas. Okay, I think we need some little swatches too. And then we'll get some more stars going. All right, let's turn our gradient back on. The history brush lets you paint with old pixels. By default, it will revert pixels back to their last state after you made some kind of change. But you get much more flexibility when you work with this tool in conjunction with the history panel. Open the hippos.jpg in Photoshop and let's see what we can do with the history brush. First, we'll need to make some kind of change to the image. Let's make it black and white by choosing Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And I can choose a preset. Okay, that's pretty dramatic, so we'll use that one. Next, we'll choose the history brush by pressing Y, and then we will undo that change we made by brushing back one of the hippos. And so here's our one hippo being brushed back into color. And so this is kind of like undo on a brush. Now that's nice, but what if we wanted to do the reverse of that? What if we wanted to make one of the hippos black and white and the rest of the image in color? Let's undo this, and then we'll open up the history panel. So I'll go to Window and History, and this is where kind of the real strength of this tool comes into effect. In the history panel, you'll notice this is kind of like where we can do our undo and redo steps. But at the top, you'll see there's what we call a snapshot. So the snapshot is the color hippos that we initially opened. We can make another snapshot by clicking on the little camera icon here. And now we have a snapshot of this black and white version of the image. For now, let's revert the image to the color image and then take a look at the little icon we have on the side here. Right now, the history brush is set to color snapshot. But if we set it to the black and white snapshot, and then we paint over one of the hippos, now the hippo is being painted in black and white. And so this is not just an undo brush, it's also a redo brush. The eraser erases things. You can set it to work like the brush, a pencil, or a block. The block is a legacy option to keep old-timers happy. It mostly works just like the pencil, except you can't freely adjust the size with the bracket keys. Instead, it will erase more or less pixels depending on your zoom state. With the eraser set to block, we'll just erase right there, and then let's enlarge the image, and then it's still set to block, and it looks like it's the same size. However, if we go back, this is much larger than that. So this block setting depends on your view percentage, how much is going to be erased. So block is just there for the diehards. I think it was originally in Mac Paint, So they've kept that for people that have been using painting applications that came even before Photoshop. The background eraser tries to erase the background of an image. If you try to use it on the background, it will convert it to a layer 0. You can choose 3 different modes of operation: discontiguous, contiguous, or find edges. None of them work very well, and it's better to use a mask instead. Next! The magic eraser also tries to erase things. You can adjust the sensitivity and click on a subject to make it disappear. It sometimes works, but there are better ways to do this. Let's try to make Mario disappear. Open the YoshiandFriends.jpg in Photoshop. I'll switch to the magic eraser tool. And then notice we have some settings up here. Tolerance 32, anti-alias, we normally want to have that on, and contiguous. Those are all good to have on. Tolerance is something we'll have to play with. So 32 is pretty low for what I think will be appropriate. So let's move that up to 69. And then we'll just try clicking on Mario here. And that gets rid of him in pieces. It's not very clean though. Oh. And there it failed us. Okay, so obviously Magic Eraser is not so magical. Vector-based. We've looked at these types of vectors before. If you set the options bar to shape, it will add a shape layer. If you set it to path, it will add a path to the paths panel. And just remember, it won't appear in the layers panel. If you set it to pixels, it will just add pixels in whatever shape you lay down. The rectangle tool will let you have rounded corners. So we'll set this, it looks like it's set to pixels. We'll change that to shape. So we'll get a nice shape layer. Fill is set to black. Stroke is set to nothing. We can set that to a color. And then we can set how wide that should be. And then let's just draw out a rectangle. And you'll notice it puts a rectangle on the layers panel here. So we have a vector shape in the layers panel. Now, if we come over to the corner on the inside, there's a little target there. And if we click and drag on that, it will round the corners of the rectangle for us. You're not just limited to putting one shape per layer. There's a settings on the options bar where you can build shapes. So let's go up here, and right now it just has one shape, and then let's see what is on that drop down. We want to combine shapes. So let's switch to a different shape. So let's do the ellipse tool. And we'll draw on top of the rectangle. And there we go. 2 shapes combined into one. I have a Piximperfect video for you to watch for homework on the pen tool this week. The freeform pen tool lets you easily draw a path just by dragging with the mouse. We've used the curvature pen tool before to create easy, nice-looking curves. If that's all you need to do, you need look no further. Just as a refresher, you click on at least 3 points, and Photoshop interpolates them to draw a nice path. Remember, Photoshop is a pixel-based program, so no matter how many shapes or vectors you have, at the end of the day, they will all be converted to pixels.